Okay, I think we're just gonna make a start at this time. I realized that it was a little bit of a shorter notice as we were trying to find a time for this optional meeting for us. Um, I always do record these meetings, so it's not a requirement to be present, but I do want to create those different opportunities for us to create a sense of community, get together, have more immediate interaction. This week, especially, there's been a lot going on. I've tried to stick to my 24-hour goal of responding to you, but if you haven't heard back from me as quickly as you would expect, normally I'm even quicker than the 24 hours. Uh, I do anticipate as the dust of the start of the term settles that we will be able to have even more instant interactions if you approach me through the Canvas messaging system. I have a couple of things that I was hoping for us to do today. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start with those, but if people trickle in, then we'll loop back into that. And like I said, do not feel a pressure. These courses are designed that this is an asynchronous course. So if it doesn't work out for you to make it in person, that is totally understandable. So let me just share my screen so we can make a start of kind of a general introduction that I normally provide to my students when we talk about the how I approach teaching and what am I kind of looking for. Let's see. I think I should be sharing my screen with you now. So first of all, welcome. I really appreciate you being here. I think it's so important that even if you're taking an online class, you do get some of that immediate interaction. So this is one of the ways how we're approaching it. What I was hoping to do today was really a two-folded process. So I want to first start with some general things that I always share with my students as for how I teach, how I approach the online courses, and then we'll make a start with our first chapter. These chapter reviews that we do weekly in these optional live online sessions don't go into as much of a detail as the full lecture videos that I have you available for you on the uh, on the canvas. So it's kind of a nutshell version of everything, and I hope that they're useful. I hope they're helpful, but please still do rely on using the full lecture experience designed for the canvas. So, like I said, here's a little bit of objectives of what I want us to touch upon, what I'd like us to talk about today. I do tend to also jump in and out of this presentation, especially to show things on the Canvas course. Obviously, if we had a bigger crowd, I would love to do a little bit of interaction, a little bit of knowing each other. Those discussion forums that I have throughout the learning modules, they're a great another way for us to interact and another great way to do that. So even though they might be sometimes structured very much towards the learning material that we're doing on that particular module, it doesn't mean that you can't start discussions on other topics. I might not engage as heavily if you're having a discussion about the pets as I would engage if you present their questions about particular topics, but I will definitely be present on those forums. And also in terms of those forums, I encourage a lot of peer support. So don't just wait for me to answer. Feel free to answer if you know answer to a question that your peer asks. Um, I think it's always good for you to know a little bit about my background. I know you're not here on this course to learn about me, so none of this is material that would be in an exam, but I think it's useful that you know how I ended up doing what I'm doing. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of how I approach teaching. We have an amazing and very diverse teaching faculty here at Chandler Gilbert, with each of us having our own path and own stories, how we ended up doing what we're doing. So it might be sometimes interesting to get those varieties of perspective. Obviously, with the name like mine, I'm not from Arizona originally. I was born and raised in Scandinavia. So a little different culture, a little different outlook, but I've been very lucky to live and work around the world. So I have some different perspectives on healthcare, on medicine, and so on. Like I think I've mentioned already throughout our course, I always encourage you to contact me through Canvas messaging system. If you send me an email, it doesn't mean that I wouldn't answer to that email, but I try to focus all the student interaction to the Canvas messaging system. I do get a lot of emails. I was looking yesterday, within 1 hour, I had over 50 new emails coming in. So there is a chance if you send me an email that you don't hear back as quickly. It is the Canvas messaging and it is my students that I prioritize. So if you send there, you'll be more than likely to hear back from me quicker. Also, like I've mentioned, my goal is to keep a 24-hour turnaround time for responding to the messages that I receive during the working week. So if you end up noticing that that you don't hear back from me within that time, please, please, please do not hesitate to resend that message. It is more than likely that it has slipped past my radar. And if you just even send the exact same message again, it's going to jump it up at the top of the queue and I will respond. It is not often, but occasionally I do try to have a life during weekends. So it might be a little longer. I aim for 48 hours during weekends to respond. But obviously when we have times like exams or those kind of weeks, I check even during weekend my messages very, very frequently so we can address any technological issues and so on. Like I mentioned, I also offer office hours on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. On Mondays and Wednesdays, my office hours, even though they're physically located at our Williams campus, I do have an online version of those office hours open throughout that entire time. So again, logging into that my WebEx room that I've shared on the announcements is probably the best way to join me. I do offer some other office hours also on Tuesday evenings at the Pecos campus, and then on Friday I am available by appointment. This doesn't mean that those are the only times you can see me. I will always find a time and a way to connect with you and meet with you if you let me know that hasn't worked. So syllabus is super useful tool for this to have a record of all of those times when we can meet and so on. But to mention a couple of words about my background, like I said, my real background is in medical imaging. That's the sphere where I entered to the medicine. So I'm very interested on how we can acquire images of a moving object with MRI imaging. The type of images that I pursue, it takes about 2 to 3 seconds to get a nice quality resolution picture of the structure. And I'm curious how we can do that for the heart. And heart obviously isn't going to stay still for 2 to 3 seconds at the time. So there's a little bit of computing, a little bit of coding involved, and that's something that I built a career of. What you see at the bottom corner of the right corner of the screen is a picture of a typical MRI scan. But we use these often for when we look at the heart, and you can see the heart there. You see the very large round circle, that's our left ventricle, and right on the side of that, going kind of more towards middle of the screen, you'll see our right ventricle. But what we use these images for, and these are actually superimposed images with contrast agent involved, is to look at tissue damage on a myocardial tissue. So that shows up as this bright signal that you can see at the bottom of the left ventricle there. This shows that the tissue is dead and it's gone. There's nothing we can do about it. But what's really more interesting for us in cardiology is to predict how big of an area of a tissue will be damaged if nothing gets done. And the pictures at the top row, those are those kind of images. These are novel imaging methods, and that's what the research team that I've been working with is more interested and more focused on. So we can assess how aggressive intervention is worthwhile if all of the damage that's going to happen has already happened. Probably not worth of putting patient through a major surgery, for example, but if there's a lot more damage to happen if we don't treat them, then obviously we're more willing to entertain those aggressive measures. So that's my real background, and you'll see that once we get to the chapters where we'll talk about things like heart and cardiovascular system, that's really where I'm on my element. That wasn't always what I did. I actually started my career working as a conservator restorer, so with archaeological and historical objects, preserving those. That took me to spend a lot of time at the excavation sites. Working with objects from the excavation sites, I'm especially interested in organic materials, and I quickly found myself working on burial sites. And as I was working on burial sites, I realized that I probably should know something about human anatomy and physiology. So I went back to school, did my undergrad and postgrad on pure human anatomy. So through that work, I got involved in some forensic work. I've been working on that sector as well. And eventually I realized that probably you can't just take a mummified body and unwrap it and have a look inside and then put it back together. It's not going to be the same thing anymore. So I quickly ended up realizing that medical imaging is something that I should become familiar. And that took me on that path. And on the path of doing medical research. I'm working also with living patients. I have done quite a bit of clinical research. I've done also just basic research. I'm especially interested in embryonic development. So from the day of moment of conception to 14 days of development of a human body, there's a lot of that information can help us to address before and how to address those if there's medical issues before they arise. So a very interesting field, a field that I'm a less talkative about because of the political climate sometimes. Like I said, my background is in medical imaging. I've been teaching for quite a few years also on medical imaging schools, also on private nursing schools, ultrasound techs especially. So that's the sphere I was in. And with all the power to private schools and opportunities through those, I did always sit a little bit of unease that is it the money that's the deciding factor whether my students are able to pursue their dream careers. So when I ended up just covering a couple of classes for a friend at the community college, I realized the beautiful nature of community colleges as an equalizer of opportunities in educational sector. So I never left. I stayed. I've been in this realm for quite a while. I've held professorships in different institutions, and now I'm here at the Chandler Gilbert, and I'm very excited to be at the community college. It's an intentional choice I do. But because I get bored easily, I also wanted to do something new. I think it's always useful when you have a teacher who has experience of being a student themselves fairly reasonably. So I go back to school, and I'm especially interested in reproductive law. So I spend a lot of time doing homework when I'm not working and teaching others. So I totally understand your experience of being a student, and I think that trickles into some of the approaches that I have towards teaching. So let's start with this. I think that this is one of the more important slides you've seen that I've sent already announcements about the same things. I'm asking you to do a couple of things for me for this week. I do need to hear from you. I do need to see you submitting assignments. And I do need you to do that for the syllabus quiz by the end of the day on August 23rd, which is going to be tomorrow, Friday. If I do not hear from you by the end of the day tomorrow on Friday, you'll probably receive a message from me really trying to chase after you and make sure that you still want to be on this class. If I still don't hear back from you, unfortunately, I'm going to have to drop you from this class, and it's not out of an ill will that I drop you from the class. I think that it's actually better for students to be dropped. I can always add you back to the class, but if you don't get dropped from the class and you're still not participating, our systems will just keep assuming that you want to be enrolled, and you will be billed for the entire semester. And we don't want that for you. We don't want you to be billed for something that you're not using. So that's why it's so important that you do complete that syllabus quiz assignment. This week, we also make a start of our first chapter. So I have 2 assignments. Typically, I have a couple of assignments or 3 assignments, sometimes 4 per week per chapter. So I have a quiz for you on chapter 1, and I have a practice anatomy as well activity for you to do. That is basically a picture version of a quiz looking at anatomical structures. So make sure that you get those in by the end of the week. Sunday night, 1 minute before midnight, Arizona time is when those assignments will close. And really the secret of succeeding in an online class is collecting all those points throughout the semester. If you just capitalize on taking exams, that's probably not going to yield as many points as you might want to have. So you would get to have that grade that you want and you deserve. Let's have a look of the typical week, what I'm asking you to do for each week. I typically have a quiz for you about that chapter that we've been looking, and I typically have a practice anatomy assignment as well. The quiz prepares you for the exams, and the practice anatomies prepare you for the practicals. And we will have 3 exams and 3 practicals throughout this semester. In addition, on some of the weeks, I have additional activities. I might have food for thought activities. These are typically short answer essays. They might be about a paragraph in length, about kind of applying the concept, applying the structures, applying the physiology that we're looking at. Occasionally, I also have virtual lab simulations for you to complete. So there's a little bit of a mixture, but pretty predictable weekly structure. In addition, on some of the weeks, we will be also completing or simply completing, it depends a little bit, exams and practicals. And typically, both exam and a practical are on the same week. So exam covers key things from the quiz, practicals cover key things from practice anatomy. So doing all that homework will build you up towards those. I will provide you further details about exams and practicals once we get a little closer to those, but you have 1 week to complete those, and during that time, I'm looking forward that you do it and get it in so you get those points. Like I said, I've been working on identifying for us optional live online meeting times. So these are not required. This course is completely built so that you can complete it as a standalone asynchronous course. But again, it's important for us that we provide you those chances to have that immediate interaction both with myself and with your classmates. So I have built this into our structure. I know that it's hard to find a thing that works for everyone. So please identify what works, or please let me just get my cursor out. Please let's find what works for most. I know that getting a perfect time is difficult, but these are the 2 days that I landed on. I just fixed the typo on that screen, so that's why I jumped out. So I'm looking for us to meet every Wednesday from 2 to 3, and again on Friday from 10 to 11. These meetings would cover the exact same material, so there's no need to be available for both. Or if you're not able to be available, I will post a recording of a meeting as well for you, so you can get the benefit of what's being covered in the meetings as well through that. I don't know if I'm going to post twice the same meeting or the Wednesday and Friday meeting. It might be that I just pick one of those if it's the exact same content. So those are what I try to offer for you. Here's a little bit of a review of what we will be covering during the next 16 weeks together. So we will start with just basics of the anatomy and physiology, some language, having an overview of systems, regions, movements, and then we'll take a step back from all that. And this is going to be kind of a reminder, the next few topics that we'll have a look. We'll talk about tissues and chemical basis of life, cells, and genetics. This should be largely revision from what you've already covered in your prerequisite classes like BIO201. So even though we go through it, and even though I have homework for you on those, I do not think that I would test you on those revision kind of themes in the exam. You've already taken exams on those and you've already done great on those. Then we'll get to our actual systems that we will review. We'll start with integumentary systems, so skin, nails, hair, glands, all that good stuff. When we look at that system, then we'll talk about the bone, cartilages, and skeleton. We'll have a look at different joints, talk about muscle tissue, but also identifying, learning the big muscles, skeletal muscles of the body that generate movements. And final section of our course is going to be about nervous system. We'll review nervous system on various levels: central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, autonomic nervous system, and having a look of special senses. And throughout the course, we will take the 3 exams and 3 practicals. Each one of these covers the chapters immediately before it, so it's not like I will come back to themes from the past as a cumulative final exam. Instead, I've divided this course into 3 sections, and each section is assessed by an exam and a practical. Like I said, I'll provide a lot more information about the exams and practicals closer to those, but what might set your mind at ease is that my job is not to catch you out. I'm here to work with you and give you chances to be successful. So trust me that I am here to see you do well. I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about the syllabus. You will find syllabus on your Canvas course on the left-hand side drop-down menu or drop menu as a concourse syllabus. This document really, I consider, is as our contract of what I'm expecting from you and what you can expect from me. So it sets the scene for the entire semester. Students often find answers to all of their questions from syllabus. If you have something that's not answered there, feel free, of course, to reach out to me as well. But sometimes if you ask me something, I will always answer, even if it's covered on syllabus, but then I might add to the message that, hey, please check the syllabus, it's there. One of the things that students really enjoy of syllabus is that it provides also week by week breakthrough down of what materials are covered and what assignments are due. So some find that very useful. You'll also see that my structure of learning modules follows weekly structure. One of the things that's going to be really important for you throughout this course, in addition to Canvas, where you find a lot of learning material, is to use Connect. Connect is our publisher's learning platform. That's where you will be completing the quizzes and practice anatomy activities. You are automatically already connected to a course on Connect. So if you click an assignment, it should automatically throw you there. You do not need to buy a new access code for that. As part of your tuition, that has already been included in there. You also do not need a registration code from me. Simply by going to the Connect through a link of one of the assignments, you will be able to access everything. It might be that you need to create an account if you've never used Connect before, but no additional charges and no additional passcodes from me needed. Connect is a great resource also outside just taking homework. Your electronic textbook is located there, and a lot of the time the quiz questions actually have a direct link that if you don't know an answer to that, you click on that and it takes you to that relevant part of the textbook, so you can do a little bit more reading. Like I said, contacting me through the Canvas messaging is probably the best thing to do. And another thing that you'll find on the syllabus is the distribution of points, how the points add up. On this course, you simply need to collect, I believe it's 91% of these points, and you have an A. So how you collect those points is up to you. I offer a lot of extra credit opportunities, a lot of additional assignments, but if you just do what's required, that will add up to 100% if you get full marks on everything. So I give many chances to kind of address if you have a whoopsie somewhere, if you miss something, how you collect those points, I'm open to that. But collecting the right number of points that represents the percentage distribution of the grades is what I'm looking for. And I do not use a curve on this grading, so it literally is the distribution that you'll find on the syllabus that dictates your final grade. I do want to take a moment to talk about the next topic. Disabilities are a theme that I'm very passionate about and very interested about. And a lot of the time, I think it helps when we set our scene of what are we talking about when we're talking about disabilities. When I ask this question in my class, sometimes I hear answers such as, oh, disabilities are when you're in a wheelchair or if you're missing an arm, things that are very visible. And absolutely, those are disabilities, but there's also so many other kind of disabilities that are not visible. They can be things like dyslexia. You'll get to know that I myself do have a dyslexia, so spelling is not my strong suit. They can be things like extreme exam anxiety and so on. So if someone has a disability, we do not want them to suffer in our classes. We're here to even out the playing field and make sure that they have a chance to succeed in a class. So if you have a documented disability, or if you have had a accommodation plan in high school, for example, I would encourage you to contact our disability resource services. I provided all the contact details there on the screen, but also you'll find them on the syllabus, and they will work with you one-on-one to identify how we might best support you. Once that has been identified, I will be notified simply about the accommodations that I will provide. I will never be learning about your disability. I will never be getting any personal information about you relating to that. My job is simply to make sure that we offer you the tools to be successful. A lot of the time, disability accommodation plans involve, for example, additional time in an exam or a different format of an exam or so on. So, like I said, work with the disability services. Even if you feel like you're fine, it's worth getting that accommodation plan on place. So if later on you need it, or if you need it in another class, you already have it done. Other thing to notice about that is that unfortunately those accommodation plans do not count for the things that have passed. It only counts from that moment onwards. So have it in your back pocket, even if you don't want to use it, just so that you don't struggle if there's delays with processing the requests at the disability services or so on. My commitment to my students is always very simple, that I will match your effort. I will match your energy as well. So if you are putting in the effort, you can count on me that I will put the same effort to help you. I will help every single student in my class, but it cannot be that I'm trying harder than you are to get you to succeed. Unfortunately, these online classes are somewhat more self-driven, so there's less opportunities for me to drag you over the finish line. So I ask you to communicate with me. More I know, more I can help. I also am respectful of your time. So when we have these online meetings, I try to be very much, let's start at the right time, let's finish at the right time, and not waste your time. But like I said, I realize we have busy lives, we have other things to do. So I also offer recordings of these online sessions. This course is way more exciting and fun for you. And it's also way more exciting and fun for me if you participate actively. So yes, I understand some people only want to do the assignments and that's it, and that's totally fine. But if you feel that you have questions, if you feel you have things to share, I will always answer to you if you message to me. But I think that if you have a question, probably someone else in this class also has this question. So I encourage you to join me on these live online sessions or use the discussion forums. More we have dialogue, more I can understand what are common themes. If there's something that I need to clarify or be more specific on, or if there's just exchange of experiences, for example. I know many of you have a lot of experience on the field already. I do want to get to know you. I do want to customize the scores, the examples that I use, so that it fits to your career goals as well. So sharing about those is super useful. And that brings us to the end of the presentation that I had about these general things. So let me jump out of sharing my screen. And what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to share a different screen. I'm going to share a screen of, let me get back to where I was, screen of our Canvas course. So we can have a look at a couple of things that I might have mentioned already, but see them in a little bit more of a detail. So let me jump to the view that you would see as a student. You'll see that my teacher view contains a lot of other material, but this week we're really working on two modules. We're working on this Start Here module, and we're working on week 1 module, which covers chapter 1. I have heard from some of the students that there were issues accessing the Concourse syllabus. So syllabus is found here, and it will open here on the screen. And like I said, it's a great resource. It won't open for me, but it will open for you because I'm not a student, so I don't have an access to a student version of my own work. What we will see instead, and let's make sure that I'm still sharing everything correctly. So what I do have done, if there are ever any issues with accessing the syllabus, this should not affect many students, but sometimes that affects a student here and there. I have also uploaded here on the Start Here module as a activity or as a file for you to pull up. You'll also find here the syllabus quiz. And like I said, please, please, please get it done by the end of the day tomorrow. We had the forum that many of you have already found with the preferred day and time for optional weekly online meetings. And I have there responded to that as well with our current meeting times that I ended up with. But I am super happy to adjust those if we end up finding that one works better or another works better. So on our week 1 learning materials, you'll find learning outcomes. I think many students find this helpful to kind of understand what I'm asking you to accomplish on this module. You'll also find lecture videos of all the things that I kind of provide a traditional lecture for you on the material. I have often short videos that are kind of more of diagrams, but you'll see how I came up with the diagram. Sometimes we pop into my classroom as well. I will provide a PowerPoint from the textbook publisher for you to refer as well. And then we have this discussion forum where you can present questions, you can get involved, and I'm here to answer any questions or just have dialogue, but I also encourage you to do that with your peers. More we create the sense of community, more fun this will be. You'll also find on each learning module the homework assignments for this week. I have 2 assignments on the chapter 1 for you, the quiz and practice anatomy, and we'll have a look if we have a time to peek in how those work. And you'll find any handouts that I would normally give to my students, so they're available there as well. You'll see that at the very bottom of the learning module, I always have an area called additional material for optional study. These are not assignments that I want you to do or require you to do. They are optional ones. So if you do those, you can earn extra credit points, but they are by no means required. Because I know that I have students with various different backgrounds, sometimes some students have already done so much that what I teach is not particularly new for them. But I don't want you to be bored in this class. So if you need more of a challenge, these want more questions are more of an application-based and more of a clinical-based questions. So that gives you a chance to do those. And you can totally do those instead of the traditional homework. What I use as a rule of thumb is that if you answer to every question on 1 more assignments, that counts pretty much for all of the homework's worth of points. Obviously, the answers would need to be complete and correct as well. So these are not needed, but they are an option for you if that's something that you desire to do. So you'll find a lot of information and a lot of things to do. You'll find questions, you'll find scenarios, but then it also gives you a chance to submit your answers. You can submit your answers as a file as long as it's a file that opens on Windows environment. That applies to all of the assignments that I'm asking back, or simply as a copy-paste the text box answer for me, typing in the text, typing in the answer. And I will then grade those and I will provide feedback. But like I said, this is for students who would want to go above and beyond of what's kind of a normal weekly material. So I think that that gives us a pretty good idea of what I'm asking you to do, and you'll see that I've opened all of your weekly chapters, weekly materials already, so nothing prevents you from working ahead. I would probably encourage you to do the exams once we've discussed what happens in an exam, so don't go too far ahead. But if you know that you have a busy week ahead, you can absolutely work ahead and stay on track in that way so that you're not then having to struggle managing your other duties. So my course is intended to be something where you can very much work in a way that fits your own schedule. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to jump out of this screen again, and I'm going to jump to another presentation. And this presentation is really simply a very quick review, the nutshell version or a crash course version of our chapter 1 material. Like I said, you will get more complete experience with the full-on discussion about the finer nuances through the lecture videos and through your textbook. But I think it's nice that we at least kind of touch upon on the big themes together for each chapter. So that's kind of what I was planning to do on this presentation that we'll have a look of together. So we have a bunch of themes that we're hoping to accomplish this week. We're hoping to talk a little bit about our about the basic language of anatomy and physiology, the concept of homeostasis, talk about body systems, and then regions and movements. I will not cover all of these on this particular session. You'll find those on our lecture videos on the Canvas course, but I'll highlight the most important things. Normally, when we have these live online sessions, I also make sure that we have time to check in, we have time to work with each other and interact. So I'm probably gonna skip it for the interest of time here today, since I don't have really participants. You don't want to hear me rambling myself, and I'm just gonna make a move with the chapter material. But I always do want to check in with you, and it might be that we'll do those check-ins in other format if it doesn't work out through these interactive sessions. I think it's important for me also to hear what is working and what isn't working. I'm not locked into this format of our courses. I always change my courses based on my students' needs. So let's start with one of the basic concepts in field of anatomy and physiology, and that's going to be a concept of anatomical position. So what I'm talking about when I'm talking about anatomical position is something that everyone who practices anatomy and physiology uses throughout the entire world. This is assuming that the person is standing upright, erect, with feet on their side, close together, and hands on the side. And hands are facing, palm facing towards the front, with the thumbs being the most lateral structures, the structures furthest most to the sides. The face is facing forward. And you might wonder why we need to have this anatomical position. Well, a lot of the time in medicine, and I'm going to use an example, I think that it's not always this gruesome, but I'll use an example from my own professional background. When you, for example, work on the forensic work, you see bodies that are not in same position. They can be in various different positions. Sometimes, unfortunately, even bodies are missing body parts or body parts have been dislodged. But when we are writing reports, when we are communicating to other professionals about someone's body, we always assume that that patient is standing in an anatomical position. So anatomical position essentially gives us a shared assumption, shared language, how we relate structures to each other. So it makes it easier for us to communicate. Even if the patient is not really in an anatomical position, by using that assumption, we're going to be much more able to discuss about relationships of structures to each other. So I really urge you to become familiar with the anatomical position. It's going to make your life easier on IMP courses and any courses that involve medicine or allied health. We can divide the body also in many different ways. One of the most common ways is to divide body into axial and appendicular body parts. Axial body parts contain your head, neck, and your trunk. And I'm not only talking about axial body parts when I'm talking about skeleton. This applies to also all other body systems. So you have some axial parts and you will have some appendicular parts. What I'm talking about when I'm talking about appendicular parts are parts that are not part of the head, neck, and trunk. So these are often our upper limb and lower limb. Again, not just in terms of the skeleton, but also in a broader scale for the other body systems as well. If you think of the term appendix, in documents, sometimes when you submit files, you might have appendices that you include into those. So they're kind of like what's not the part of the main body, that's an additional part of that. So upper limbs, lower limbs is a good way of thinking at it at this point. We'll go into a little bit of more detail, and there's a little bit more finer nuances as we get further on this course. Other thing that you'll notice that when we do anatomy and physiology, a lot of the time there's a lot of directional terms that we use to talk about specific body parts. For example, we do not talk about the region of an eye. We have a specific word for it, orbital. We do not talk about area of mouth. We actually have a specific word for that, oral region. Similarly, chest cavity is our thoracic cavity. Our belly region is our abdominal region. We don't talk about belly button. We actually talk about umbilical region, remnants from the umbilical cord, of course, and so on and so on. So at the beginning, I do remember when I was starting my path in medicine and anatomy and physiology, this might seem overwhelming to memorize all of these. But what you'll find as we go through different body systems is that these regional terms that we use to designate specific body areas actually originate a lot of the time from the structures that are on that area. So they're either the bones related to that area or muscles related to that area, or somehow otherwise that's going to make your life easier. So I would encourage you as we go through the body systems, really learn these because that will give you this language that's expected in medical field that you have, that we don't use the layman's terms, we use the accurate anatomical medical terminology. The difference between the layman's language and medical terminology is that these are much more precise. So we're able to communicate. And also these terms often translate from one language to another. So it makes that communication, again, so much more easier. I have provided a very similar handout for you on your lecture materials. So again, if you're a learner who needs a little bit of time and rather than me just reading this aloud in your lecture videos and pointing different parts, I encourage you to take the time and identify these parts. If you do have a family member who's willing, maybe you can point out the different parts and tell them that, hey, this is going to be your scapular region here, rather than saying that this is where your shoulder blade is. We call it with the proper terms. So learn that language, take the time to learn it. I understand it's a lot and it will become clearer as we go through different body systems, but it's really going to be making your life so much easier if you do it now. Another thing that I wanted to talk about today was the fact that we often study human body by dividing body with different planes. So we have median plane, which is also known as sagittal plane. Medial plane or sagittal plane divides your body into half so that you have right and left side of your body. The median plane doesn't always have to cut bang on in the middle. The median plane can be also on the sides, but it always creates a left and right side. And this doesn't even have to be in relation to the whole body. This can be in relation to a single organ. We could take a medial cut of the heart and we would have left and right side of the heart. If we do that cut bang on in the middle of the body on a medial plane or sagittal plane, we talk about having a mid-sagittal view. So that refers when that plane is right in the middle. But the big thing here is that we always end up with the left and right side. The other plane that I wanted to talk about is our frontal plane or coronal plane. Frontal plane gives you a front of an individual and a back of an individual. And again, the frontal plane or coronal plane doesn't have to be bang on in the middle. It can be either way, but you always are left with more front and more back part of the body. The term coronal sometimes confuses my students. How I explain it to them, I spend a lot of time in the United Kingdom, where we do have a royal family. So I take examples from there. Think of when you are a royal person and you're putting on a crown. How you would put on crown where your hands come down is where the coronal plane will cut. So you're cutting yourself into two. Hopefully that helps you to remember that. I think it's a nice way of thinking. And finally, we have our transverse, also referred sometimes as horizontal plane, which cuts us in half, but this time so that we are left with upper and lower part of the body. And again, the transverse plane can be cut in any height, but it always leaves you with an upper and lower portion. And it doesn't even, again, have to be just in relation to the body. It can be in relation to an organ. For example, we could take a brain and divide brain in half, and we would be left with upper and lower portion of that brain. That would be still using our transverse plane to cut the brain organ in this example. Sometimes we do have cuts that we do in the body that don't align with any of these three planes. And if you look at these three planes, they really form a three-dimensional, almost like a coordinate system. But sometimes we need to take a cut that doesn't align with anything. So if you look at the pen that I have here, this cut, if I cut through this way, wouldn't align to any of these planes that we have learned so far. So we would call these planes oblique planes, or cutting in an oblique plane, the structure. So something that you'll end up seeing that happens sometimes. We also need to talk a little bit about directional terminology. Directional terms are used to describe, again, body structures' relations to each other. So what I have here, I have a person standing in an anatomical position. So you see it's becoming handy already now. And I'm pointing you that we have a superior and inferior portion of this body. The superior portion is always the upper portion, and inferior is the lower portion. Remember, these are terms that we use in relation to structures. So you would have two structures that you connect to each other. For example, shoulder would be more superior than palm of my hand if I'm in an anatomical position. It is higher up than the palm of the hand. Palm of the hand would be more inferior than the shoulder. So these are relating two structures to each other. If you think of these terms a little bit, I think that superior can be well explained if you think that you work in an organization that has a very big hierarchy. Who's boss? Your boss is your supervisor. They're superior to you because they're one step higher in that organizational chart. Sometimes someone can talk to another person in a very patronizing way, and that person who's being talked down on might feel inferior as a result. So it's when that relationship is that they're lower in that sense. Hopefully you don't end up in those situations that someone would be talking to you as making you feel inferior, because I don't think that that's the goal. But maybe that helps you to remember those two terms. So superior, higher up, inferior, lower down. We also can use terms anterior and posterior. Anterior refers to the front part, so at the front of the body, whereas posterior refers to the back part at the back of the body. So again, remember, these terms are relative terms. We use them in relation to structures. So for example, my nose would be more anterior than my ear. My ear would be more posterior than my nose. So hopefully that makes sense. The relationship between nose and ear was what I used as an example, but this could apply anywhere in the body, and it could also apply in a single organ level. We can also talk about structures being medial or lateral. Medial structures are closer to the midline of the body, whereas lateral structures are away from the midline. So for example, your belly button will be very medial structure, and in relation to the belly button, your thumb, if you're standing in an anatomical position, is a very lateral structure. So lateral, far away from the midline, medial, close to the midline. We can also talk about structures as whether they are proximal or distal. Proximal structures are close to the origin of that structure. Often in this example, it would be close to the trunk. So my shoulder would be more proximal, whereas my palm of the hand would be more distal because my upper limb starts from the shoulder region. But we sometimes use these terms also in relation to, for example, blood vessels. Where the blood vessel starts, that's a proximal portion of that blood vessel. And where a blood vessel is not close to the start, it's further along the line, that's a distal portion. So I might talk about a blockage in a coronary artery, whether it's a proximal portion of that coronary artery or whether it's further down distal portion where there is that blockage. Of course, if it's a proximal portion, that's going to cause then blood not to flow to any of the distal portions either, and that would be a problem. So sometimes we do need to use these terms, and that can be super crucial for our medical work. Because some animals stand and walk on 4 legs, and some animals stand and walk on 2 legs, like humans. And we also have sometimes terms that might seem like a repetition when we talk in relation to human body, but that wouldn't be repetition if we're talking in relation to an animal that's in a different situation. So the term cranial refers to a structure that's closer to the skull, to the head, especially the cranium where the brain is held inside. So close to that portion, or caudal refers closer to the tailbone. So obviously our cranial is going to be the same as superior, and our caudal is going to be the same as inferior. But this would not be the case if we had, for example, a dog that stands on 4 legs. Their cranial would be actually their anterior portion, and their caudal would be actually their posterior portion. So again, this is where the anatomical position comes important. But on this course, we're focusing on humans. We're not focusing on comparative anatomy. We can also have terms prone and supine. Supine refers that if you lay, for example, on the floor on your back so that your front is facing up, that would be you in supine position. When you're laying on the floor with your face facing downwards, you would be in a prone position. But again, it doesn't have to be only in relation to the whole body. We can use words prone and supine also in relation to our palm or to our hand. So now my hand is in a supine position because the palm is facing up. Now it's going to be in a prone position because my palm is facing down. How I think of this always is that I put my hands like this, and I think of when I'm carrying a bowl of soup, my hands are in a supine position. Hopefully that helps someone. Okay, finally, I wanted to mention terms superficial and deep. So superficial is, of course, close to the surface, whereas deep means that it's not close to the surface, it's closer to the deeper structures within the body. So those were some directional terms that I wanted to cover today. And we're going to finish with a couple of other notions. Our body is actually formed of various different cavities. So we can divide these cavities roughly in 2 parts. We have our dorsal body cavities, which our dorsal was referring to the back. And we have our ventral body cavities, which are referring in this case towards the front. So dorsal body cavities actually contain our nervous system, or many parts of our nervous system. So dorsal body cavity can be divided into two sections. We have our cranial cavity, which houses your brain inside the cranium. So inside the bony structures that form the skull around the brain. So that's our cranial cavity. And then we have our vertebral cavity, which is that structure, that space within the vertebral column, where the spinal cord runs. So spinal cord runs in our vertebral cavity, and together they form the dorsal body cavity. On the ventral body cavities, we have few different regions. We can see thoracic cavity. Thoracic cavity is basically what we're thinking of as chest cavity. This houses your lungs, heart, great vessels, and so on. You'll actually see that we can divide thoracic cavity even further. Thoracic cavity is separated from abdominal cavity by your diaphragm, that thin sheet of muscle that separates the chest and abdomen. An abdominal cavity contains your digestive system organs, many of them. And then there's finally a pelvic cavity. Actually, the abdominal and pelvic cavity are not separated by a clear structure. They're just a continuation. The pelvic cavity is where we find, for example, urinary bladder and reproductive organs and things like that. But together, the thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavity form our ventral body cavity. Sometimes I do also see that people talk about abdominal and pelvic cavity together, and they call it abdominal pelvic cavity. So you might see that as well being used. We can use a lot of other language. For example, when we're talking about abdominal area, often for clinical purposes, we divide it into further subsections. Here you see the abdominal pelvic quadrants. So we have our right upper quadrant, where we would find, for example, liver and gallbladder. We have our left upper quadrant, where we typically find things like stomach would be good for that. We find our right lower quadrant. This is where we find, for example, the cecum, the first part of large intestines, and our appendix. And then we have our left lower quadrant, where we would find the last parts of the large intestines, for example. So sometimes using again those terms is really important when you're describing that the patient is having right upper quadrant pain. That's much more accurate than saying just that they have pain on their belly. That allows us to start thinking what structures are located on that area. So getting familiar with the language is useful. We can divide abdominal pelvic cavity further. We can actually divide it into 9 regions, and I'll let you learn more about those on your own. And that brings me to the end of the lecture material that I wanted to cover kind of as a crash course on this time together that we have. Very final thing, and let me stop sharing my screen. Let's see here. Very last thing that I'm going to do, I realize that we're almost out of time, but I do want to show you also the homework assignments. So let me just do a couple of things on the back end, so I'm not sharing anything that I shouldn't share in terms of the homework assignments. But when you go to your quiz, for example, you simply click on that on your Canvas course, and you will automatically land on to the Connect, which is the publisher's platform where we work. And let me share my screen again. Let's see. So you will see that on our Chapter 1 quiz, we have 14 questions, and they add up to 10 points in total. And these quiz questions are very varied. Sometimes it's true, false, sometimes it's fill in a blank, sometimes it's matching activities, sometimes it's drag and drop activities. They vary a lot. But let's have a look at a couple of them just to get you started. Here, you would be dragging labels to relevant areas. You would be saying whether that label describes an anatomical structure or whether that label better fits as a description of a physiology of the body. So we'll end up seeing that anatomy is the study of the form, so it's study of structures, whereas physiology is study of functions, how things work. If we have a statement that tells us that each kidney contains approximately 6 to 10 pyramids, medullary pyramids, what we see there is that that's a very anatomical description. It describes the structure. It doesn't talk about function. However, if we have a statement that says that cellular energy requires the body's production of ATP, that's really a description of a physiological process. It tells how things are functioning. Again, we're seeing an anatomical description here. We're seeing that human heart is comprised of 4 chambers, so 4 spaces within the heart in an anatomical sense. That is very much of an anatomical description. A physiological description would be if we talk about how muscles work, for example. So skeletal muscles contract by a process called sliding filament theory. And you'll get to learn a lot more about these as we go through our course, but basically muscle on a microscopic level is made of actin and myelin filaments, and they slide past each other, either extending or shortening the muscle. So that's describing how things work, and so and so and so on. So you would work through these questions, track them to the right place, and then move on to the next question and next question. Again, here I have a question. You will learn about concept of homeostasis. Again, I can't cover everything on these review videos, but you'll find it on your full lecture video. And we'll see that homeostasis is really important for maintaining human body in balance. Most diseases are a result when we don't maintain balance. And most homeostatic mechanisms work through negative feedback, which tries to stop changes from happening. So keep us constant. There's actually only 3 times in the body when there's positive feedback mechanism taking place. In these things, something's changing and your body makes it change even more. Those 3 examples of positive feedback would be childbirth, lactation, and blood clotting or scab formation. So all other mechanisms would be negative feedback, and negative feedback is what we normally do to keep the body at balance. And you'll get to learn a lot more about that on the lecture videos. And finally, I wanted to show you, sometimes you get a little video, you get to watch it, you get to learn about it, and then there's true, false questions. Here we're being asked, is it true that positive feedback loop causes self-amplifying cycle when physiological change leads to even greater change in the same direction? So change happens and we promote that change even further. That is absolutely true. So you will work through these assignments on your own. And these assignments are really what does make your homework activities. I will also show just an example of the practice anatomy questions. Again, I won't do all of them with you, but just to give you an idea of what to expect, what the homework might look like. So let me share my screen again now that I've gotten to the place that I can show you. Here we go. You should be seeing my screen and you'll see that practice anatomy for chapter 1 contains 14 questions, adding up in total to 10 points. Here we've been looking at levels of organization in the body. The smallest things that we'll see are atoms. Atoms are the smallest elements that we can break chemically. Obviously, there are, though, also subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, and electrons. But to access those, it's not basic normal chemical means that allow us to do that. If we have 2 or more atoms that don't come together, they form a molecule. And then large molecules are known as macromolecules. We'll also see that we will have cell organelles. These are all the parts of a cell, and they make up a cell. Cell is a single living thing on its own. We have some single-celled organisms, but then we have multicellular organisms like human body. When you have a bunch of cells that come together, they form a tissue. So tissues serve a same purpose. They're similar as in terms of the cells that make them up. If we have multiple different kinds of tissues, but they're all located on a same area and they serve a same purpose, these tissues now form an organ in your body. And once we have multiple organs, that come together to serve a same process in the body. These organs form an organ system. So a good example was that we saw here a stomach, and stomach is part of a larger organ system, which is known as our digestive system. Our digestive system contains, in addition, many other parts such as small intestines, large intestines, liver, pancreas, gallbladder, esophagus, and the oral structures. So there's a lot more than just one organ that work together to form an organ system. And once you put multiple organ systems together, for example, in a human, we'll see that we have 11 organ systems that form a full organism. Organism is a single living entity, such as a single human in this case. So you'll see that we can study life at many levels. You learn more about this on your lecture videos and also on your textbook. And then you show me that you've learned all this information by completing these activities. One more example, and then we're going to wrap it up. Here, I'm asking you to identify different body systems. So we're seeing here digestive system made of all the parts that are responsible for us to take in food and then utilize that food, extract energy and nutrients from that food, and eliminate any food that cannot be used as feces from the body. So that's our organ system. We already discussed that a little bit. Integumentary system instead refers to your skin and associated structures. And with associated structures, I'm meaning things like hair, nails, and glands. So skin forms an outer barrier for our body, but is also important in regulatory functions. For example, regulating body temperature. We excrete some of the waste products like salts through the skin, and so on and so on. We won't talk on this course about endocrine system. That's what your BIO202 course will start with. But endocrine system basically refers to the glands that produce hormones, and hormones, their actions, and so on and so on. So endocrine system, all about hormones. Muscular system instead. Muscular system, in this example, we're looking at big skeletal muscles that are responsible for moving our body. And that's something that we will cover throughout this semester. We'll name the most important muscles and look at what movements they make. Finally, here you would be identifying lymphatic system, responsible for collecting lymph from interstitial space, transporting it back and dumping it to the cardiovascular system. Also, immune system happens to live inside the lymphatic system. So I often describe to my students as a lymphatic system, almost like as a drainage system that captures whatever leaks out of the cardiovascular system. So again, a bunch of different kinds of questions that you get to do. Here you're being shown a system and asked, what is this system? We're seeing brain, our spinal cord, and various important nerves highlighted. And we're being asked, we know that that is going to be our nervous system, and we're being asked, what is the function of this system? Well, what's the function of the nervous system would be that this is our control centers. That's the best, most accurate answer out of the options that we're showing here. So I think that that gives us a pretty good idea of what kind of things you can expect on homework. I think we've done a pretty good job of revising the course expectations, but also how the course will work. I hope that this has been of a use for you. I will post this recording on the Canvas course so you can access it anytime you wish. And if anyone happens to be available, and again, there's no stress, these are simply optional times, optional options, you are more than welcome to join me this Friday from 10 to 11 when we will have this session all over again. If there's anyone present, we will have more of a dialogue. And remember those discussion forums as another place to exchange quickly ideas, get clarifications. And of course, you can always message to me as well. I hope you have a very good week, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. Until then, bye.